All right, so here's some tools that have been proven in the federal space and elsewhere. Here's where we are, by the way, in our roadmap for today. And I want to look at these tools in this order. What we want to strive for is integrating those things, because we're finding out that there's a lot of data in a lot of places, and being able to share that info is really important. The theme is this: getting the right information. Kind of going back to the whole people thing, and Kathy's question, quite frankly, there's a lot of pressure on people. And where we used to try to get everyone together and, have relatively large conferences about a particular issue, that's not going to happen anymore. But when you do go after people, there's basically three kinds out there. When you get them, you spend $2,000 flying somebody someplace to have a conference. They get there, there's the expert on something, and they don't say anything. This happens all the time. The other side of that is you don't get exactly who you want. You get their proxy or the proxy's proxy. They don't really know much, but you can't get them to be quiet. So what we're aiming for is contributors who know a lot and will participate well. And my hypothesis here is it's another one of these U-shaped curves in terms of distribution of people. Now, the fact is that if we have a technology that can access these people, no matter where they are in the world, no matter what they're doing, we can get information better, faster, and cheaper. And I'll show you that. So from a planning perspective, you don't need a tool to plan, but you do need a tool to be sure that everybody's flying in the right direction. Information, we'll call it. By the way, when we get into some of these, I'm going to block out a lot of data because some of it's super sensitive and some of it's just generally sensitive. But in this particular case, this leader had a plan, and we'll just call those strategic goals A through F with sub goals. Everybody has that. The question is, how well are the actions of my organization, which are here, we'll call them projects or programs, that are a couple of hundred, totaling about $1 billion, are they aligned with what we want to get done? And if you see this yellow here, it's an indication that there's misalignment. If it's horizontal, that means you've got programs that, for some reason, or projects, that don't align with the strategy. If you've got verticals, you've got some strategic goals that do not yet appear to have any supporting actions. So in a snapshot, the boss can see this. And when we first were creating this leader called me and said, hey, I want to see every single project we have. And I said back, maybe what we want to do is limit you to the top 10. And he said, Jim, you're not listening to me. I want to see every single one. And so that's what we gave him. You run the risk here. You have to be really good. And again, we're in the tech business. We're not in the consulting business. But the folks that use these things have to be good in keeping the right level of interest so that you don't create micromanages. Second question about certainty. How certain am I that we're integrated and aware across all of those initiatives? There are supported and supporting relationships, to borrow a military term. And we have to know what's going on. So here, if I'm running the program adaptive planning, well, who is supporting me? Well, this project down here, apparently. And who am I supporting? Oops. Here, these two. It's fair to ask, are those other projects, and am I doing my part to deliver? Otherwise, we're hurting. Okay, so I just lost my screen. There we go. That's two things we'll talk about in terms of planning. Analysis, we're going to spend a little more time. How certain am I that we've identified the best solutions? We've beat this to death a little bit in the preamble coming into this particular part of the conversation. But we don't need to fly around the world to do 130 country analysis. We need to be able to do these things in days, maybe weeks. And let me give you an example. And this is the beginning of February, so just 2 months ago. I was talking to some federal folks who had just finished a 2-year analysis on equal opportunity in certain job titles. 2 years. And the kicker was that the report is not going to be delivered till 2021. Right, it's going to take another year to write the report. So this goes back to this whole notion of organizational cancer. If that's really a big problem, you think the problem might change in 3 years? That's millions of dollars of heavy hitting, because I know who the consultancy was, heavy hitting consulting power on a 3-year issue. It's just not going to work. And we do this all the time. Not just federal, this is true everywhere. We have to have better ways of doing it, and we have some of those. Because at the end of the day, remember going back to this cube, we can't have perfect information that is, let's say, a group of 150 consultants and 20 subject matter experts. We don't have perfect knowledge of what this cube is for all possible performance issues, but a machine will have it. And so we need to rely on software to give ourselves better answers faster. I'd like to think that we have 3 ways to analyze performance. Well, I'll call them a 3-click, a 4-click, and a deep analysis. And again, sticking with our today's conversation, knee tap, X-ray, MRI. The knee tap, we developed this because there are a lot of occasions where you go see a leader and he or she says, I know what I want to do. Well, it's kind of hard sometimes to get people off of those things. So we just roll with it. All right, boss, what do you want to do? Well, I want to revise our organizational structure. I want to develop a new training program. Whatever that thing is, let's just go ahead and click and see what we get. Click 2 over here, over the top is, all right, if that's really true, if that's what you want to do, what gap or what barrier are you trying to solve for? Click one of those. And then you get one more screen that says, that's fair enough. If that's your issue and that's the barriers, here's some additional things that you might want to consider. So it took me longer to describe this than it takes to use this analysis tool. And what you're doing is you're not trying to convince anybody to do or not do anything. You're simply letting the system work, the database work. And now you're talking about whether or not the data are right or the system is right, but it keeps the consultant, whether that's an internal consultant or external consultant, it keeps them in the executive conversation and not as a blame target. All right, another way of doing analysis, a little bit deeper, we call 4-step analysis. You see more than that over in that yellow box on the left. But really, this boils down to, what are you trying to do? How does the work get done? We call that a task list. What tasks are deficient or what activities are deficient, and how would you fix it? Again, it's data light, because you're basing this on subject matter experts. But if you can at least get to this particular piece, then over on the right, the system automatically displays a weighted solution set and suggest where the biggest advantages are going to be. That second pie down there on the lower right. For some reason, my mouse is, my pointer is not pointing. All right. The deep dive can be heavy, but as heavy as it is, this particular example, these are, by the way, all those boxes are mine, so it kind of clutters up that home screen there. This was a pretty serious issue, a global security issue. There were 300 and something tasks involved in the work, and there were hundreds of SMEs. Now imagine the normal way of getting this done. It's pure government. Bring folks in for a couple of conferences, break into working groups, present the issues, have a bunch of people come in and tell us why things are important, and then send everybody back after 3 days, because you got to get there on Monday because that's a work day, and you got to leave on Friday or Thursday night. So you get 2.5 days of people talking. In this particular case, there was no travel. There was no nothing. There was a smart Q&A system that went out to subject matter experts in those 4 areas in the middle of the work screen: management, collections, fusion analysis, and dissemination. And we assessed each of the tasks based on subject matter expertise. And all of that data came pouring in over a Christmas holiday. And what it led to was, it just aggregates naturally. So an analysis that would normally take at least 9 months, maybe a year, was done in 3 weeks. And a few weeks after that, they got approval by the senior decision makers for 300 million targeted solutions. And you can kind of see those solutions over in that yellow box. You can't see the actual solutions, but you can see kind of the areas: policy, organization, training, material, personnel, and facilities. This thing was monumental in driving to the desired results. All right. Sorry. Once you have data, then you can start weighting things. And the beauty of being able to weight solutions is that you can let different factors come into play. That could be a scenario, it could be resource driven. There's a lot of different ways you could weight things. In this case, is a combination of a DoD and State Department analysis. This is, again, funny enough, 139 countries. I mentioned 130 before. They needed to readjust staffing associated with security assistance. Now, just think of the bill to travel to 139 countries. And think of the risks. I mean, you run out of the France's and Germany's pretty quick. And you're sending people to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Burkina Faso, Mali, etc. There's just no need for that when the internet works. So from an analysis perspective, you can really rock it when you use the cloud. Any questions on either one of those? The planning stuff or the analysis stuff? All right. Last couple things.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a question on the analysis tool.
Uh-huh.
Just to go back a couple of minutes, what if the boss wants, or what if what the boss wants is not correct with the end in mind?
Well, that goes back to that first tool where you're just letting the data drive the conversation initially. And if they don't buy it, then you'll say, well, would you mind if I take a look around? And that's what that middle, that 4-click analysis is meant to do. Because in an hour or two, you can present some data that allows the boss to reconsider their position. And at the end of the day, our job is to present data that is actionable. So just like if somebody's very sick and the physician says, look, these are the 4 things that you need to do to get healthy. It's ultimately up to the patient to decide whether or not they're going to follow that particular regimen. If they don't, well, then, it's going to be difficult to help them. My best advice is you give it a couple of shots, and if it doesn't work, you do what the boss is asking for, and then I'll call it, you give them an artifact. And that doesn't mean you put a half-hearted effort into it. You give them what they're looking for, but you keep in mind these other tools that need to revolve around that solution to reinforce it. And that's how you're going to get around those things. I mean, if the boss is that hard over, then don't try to fight it, but lead with the evidence.
And then we have a quick follow-up question. So how do you address the data issues and making sure that your data is quality and accurate?
So right now there is no data.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody who starts with where's the data going to come from for this analysis? Right now it's almost all talking. And so any data that you get is going to be better than the data you currently have. And if it's data related to people's opinions, as opposed to people just talking into thin air at a conference or a working group or a tiger team or whatever, you are going to qualify that data on like a 1 to 10 scale or a yes-no scale, depending upon the way you want to approach the analysis. So an opinion comes with a number. And when you send these analyses out to subject matter experts, you know exactly who is saying what. And so sometimes you might get in, let's say you're using a 1 to 10 scale on a set of tasks, and you're asking which of these tasks is not currently being performed to standard. And you see a lot of people saying, just generally 7, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, lots of 8s, high numbers, meaning there's not many problems here. But then over here, a few tasks are down into 1s and 2s and 3s. And you can set your threshold wherever you want for concern. Maybe you set it at a 6. But you might then see like there's 2 or 3 subject matter experts that either you've picked or the community has picked who see things exactly opposite. This happens, by the way. You can get on the phone and say, hey, it looks like you're out of alignment with people. And one of 2 things is going on there. Either they misread the scale, which is easy to correct, and they don't even have to do it. You just have the tech guys go in and fix it. Or they know something everybody else doesn't know. And so you've just uncovered a hidden gem. That's how you deal with the data. And then you reinforce those opinions with other data that the organization has. In the example of that security cooperation thing, we pulled something like 6 or 7 different, I call them data sources. And you'd think that means some sort of database someplace. Well, it doesn't. It means a bunch of spreadsheets, a couple of paper reports that we had to, rejigger into something we could use. And you take all of those opinions and you match them up to the hard data that is accessible. So no matter what you do using the tools that we just discussed, or something like that, you guys can pick your own, the data situation will be dramatically better than it currently is today. We good with that, Bree?
Yes, that's all the questions we have.
Thank you. All right, activity and program management. I need to make things easy on my team. That's what the boss says. This young man here is working on a shift schedule. As it turned out, it was 17 pages wide, and you can see it looks like 2 or 3 pages deep. And that's for every shift. There was 20 of them. And so if people's time is absolutely of no value, then this is what we should be doing. those kinds of schedules. But if you put them online, then you can do all kinds of fantastic things. You can split out just a particular topic like maintenance to be sure you're not overloaded. You can look at training to be sure everything is coordinated. You can slice and dice this however you want to. You cannot do it on these things. And once something changes over here, you've got to change like 7 sheets because everything bleeds over. It's crazy, but this is the way things happen almost all the time. And again, we're talking about, this is a DOD example. That doesn't make them bad. I mean, this is just the way things happen. And it happens like this everywhere in the world. So we can eliminate all that. You can eliminate that by just putting it online. And once you've got the schedule nailed down for a particular type of activity, when you put in one key date, it'll auto-populate. So you don't need anybody typing anything. It just happens. So look for ways to simplify scheduling. And the other thing that you want to probably think about is creating what I'll call project-specific task patterns. There are different types of activities in your organization. There's no reason to recreate the wheel every single time one of those things gets assigned. And via the cloud, you can do this. And a lot of project management tools, you can't do it. You've got to eat what they serve. Sorry. And so by laying out those processes, those task activities for particular actions in your organization, almost everybody can become an expert on day one. There's no learning curve. Everybody can just do what they need to do. So if it's a quick project, task list comes up. If it's an assessment or a recommendation formulation that you have to do, another type of checklist comes up. And you could even add another factor, maybe it's priority, maybe it's something else. But this allows you to this is a culture creator, because people know how the work gets done around here. Makes things very, very easy, low friction. And I want to just say one thing about project management. A lot of times we use certain tools because there's the Gantt chart. Everybody hates Gantt charts. There's one guy in 100 that likes them. And, you got to have the interrelationships. You got to have all this other stuff. These create a lot of false confidence. There's another friction creator, and they ultimately slow things down, because at the end of the day, what? People just want to know, when is it due? And if you create checklists, you can make things a lot more powerful. There's a housing example, by the way, a public housing example, a big one too, one of the top 15 in the nation. And they had those, they tried to have a bunch of Gantt charts because that's what the boss wanted, kind of going back to that last question. And the chief of staff said, boss, look, we can't do it like that. It's too complex. Here's what we need. It's 250 tasks across 10 major phases. This is how we're going to manage the development process. And that's what they did. And so they were able to create a really nice and tidy system that everybody can follow. You know where Norman is. You know where Will is. You know what Treva has to do. And you know whether or not they did it. Makes things a lot easier. So I would ask you just to kind of rethink your Gantt chart stuff. Real quick, risk assessment. You ought to automate it. There's multiple options. You can do it however you want to, but the key is to be sure you're doing it in a consistent way. Again, culture building, risk reducing, confidence building. And then how certain are we that we have the right priorities? This goes back to weighting. You can weight any way you want. If it's a task list or it's a gap list, or if you're trying to lay out resources. Here we're doing some country stuff. We're not showing that. Super easy. But you cannot do this. You should not do this on a spreadsheet, because then that gets lost in history. Reporting decision making, I just want to say a couple of things. There's a hospital, by the way, a skilled nursing facility. sorry, skilled nursing facility that had in February a bunch of infections popping up. These were not COVID, by the way, but they were respiratory. When they started seeing this popping up, they got an alert from their what we call an early warning system. And a little bit of challenge here, folks. Sorry. In their early warning system, it was saying, hey, there's some rooms that look like they're at risk. They were able to put people on a protocol, keeping a quick eye on them, and really take care of those folks. And they went from 60-something cases to 4 actuals and 0 deaths, which is very rare in a skilled nursing environment. And then the last thing is, sorry, it's now working automatically. How do I know that I have a clear picture? Cloud can help you do that. You can show other people your progress. This is, again, a public housing example. Very important when you're talking to stakeholders, citizens, legislators, because they want to know. We'll just take one minute here to talk about employee engagement, and then we'll finish up with a few questions. The first piece of engagement is, am I hearing people? This is going to be super important now that people aren't in the office every day. What can we do better around here? These multi-item, multi-point engagement questionnaires are no longer relevant. They take too long. Nobody really cares. And up until February or beginning of March, it's very unlikely that anybody who gave a low score of 1 or 2 was going to stay in the organization. They were already failing. So it's way more important to learn how the work environment, now that work environment is virtual, how it can be improved. And we've done this a lot with in hospitals, interestingly enough, given today's conversations, in order to help keep nurses. And when you ask nurses what's going on around here, they almost never say pay. You know, they protest about pay once in a while, but that's not what they're concerned about. They're concerned about things that they need to do that will take care of patients. And when you hear from them, you record those things in a system. They actually submit them electronically. The leaders assign those things as tasks, those activities, those recommendations. They get completed, and then they get reported on. Everybody sees what's going on. And here are the results. And when I say this is not smoke and mirrors. This is fact based on national nursing standards. When you can save 1% turnover in a hospital, that's $373,000. So say the national experts. We're routinely saving people 5 to 10%, 9.6%. I just rounded that up. But you can do the same thing with one question. What can we do better around here? And your results are going to be phenomenal. And then the last thing is adding accountability. And the key there, I'll just quickly wrap this piece up by saying you've got to tie individual and organizational success together, because in a lot of cases, this is a fearful time for people. And just as an example, Facebook has suspended all performance reviews. You're going to see that more and more. And if you're suspending them, certainly, there's some angst going on right now, but you can't suspend them forever. But you can shift them. How are you contributing to the organizational good? And how can we reward people for the good work our organizations are doing? Make it data-driven. So this is what we did today. We're really talking about the tools of the organizational physician. When you tie it together, you're talking about an organizational health record. And if you wanted to do something like this, the way I would recommend doing it is you start small. You focus on 1 or 2 areas that are important to your organization, and you add others as you need to go. And this is what you'll get. You'll get increased certainty, but you're going to better use your staffs. You're going to be more coordinated, and you're going to be able to show people in a super crystal way progress and results that you've achieved for them. And then going back to this idea of how to implement, here's 4 things that we've learned. You've got to have these in order to make it work. People need to know what the goal is, what the desired outcome is. They need to know that their sponsors and stakeholders are committed. That's next level leadership needs to have a lot of energy around the goal. And you've got to be, we'll call them early adopters internal to your organization. In whatever initiative it is that you're driving, there has to be an incentive for those folks. And other people need to see that incentive. So that's the big 4. This is what we talked about today. And if there needs to be a follow-up, there's 3 things going on here. This is how you get a hold of me. This is how you get a hold of American University, particularly related to their key webinar info. And you can get a hold of ISPI for that upcoming conference. So with that, I want to say again, thank you very, very much for allowing me to spend time with you today in challenging situations. And I'm hoping that everybody stays healthy. And I'm absolutely willing to hang on here for a little bit and take any questions that folks might have.
Yes, we do have some questions coming in, and thank you so much for being here with us. We have a lot of people just saying thank you, Dr. Hill, for sharing your presentation with us. So just to take a step backward for a couple of questions, when you were talking about augmented solutions having an optimal mix of people, capital, and tools, what are your suggestions on how we manage the eventual transition back, considering the culture has arguably not been adequately shifted with the speed of change?
Yeah, so I'm going to presume that what we're talking about is when people go back, it's going to be really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be hard because now people have all this autonomy. And what you're finding out is you don't need an 80-hour week to get your job done. That's the first thing we're finding out. 2, you don't have to be there all the time. 3, you can do a lot of things without massive supervision. But what we're also finding out is that sometimes it's hard to get a hold of people. So, my recommendation obviously is I'm a tech guy. So I want people to be connected electronically as much as they can be. I would, and thinking about the analysis side, I would absolutely automate every single one of those. I would hardly ever do a group rope for the purposes of information finding. What I would use those for is times to present information that has been gathered electronically. And that's what those can really be impactful. In fact, we've done that a few times, and it's been magnificent because people see what everybody else has said. But you cut the costs from this to that. The other thing you are going to have to start thinking about is what your budget's going to look like, because it's probably going to skinny down a little bit. But the main thing is let people have that autonomy, because they're proving right now that they can run with it.
We have a couple more questions. One is, as learning and development professionals, what can we do now to best address performance in our organizations?
Tie skill and knowledge needs to other pieces of the organization. I should say other parts of the organization solution, because it's very likely that training alone is the problem. Typically, we do training for 1 of 3 reasons. 1, people don't know how to do something, which is kind of rare. if that's true, that's probably either it's a hiring problem. Number two, the job has changed, which is likely. Or three, there's some regulatory requirement. So when you approach training, you can approach it in those three contexts. But you're doing it for a bigger reason. Again, this kind of goes back to that 80-20 thing on that Gilbert model, that behavior engineering model. 80% of the time, performance issues are in that upper tier, that organizational piece. And so I would be sure that as you're doing learning and development stuff, you make yourself a lot more powerful and a lot more credible when you say, these are the things that we're doing, but here are 3 or 4 other organizational level solutions that also need to be introduced in order for the full performance issue to be dealt with. When you look at it more holistically, or when you ask your bosses to look at things more holistically, you're going to reposition yourself, and not just as a learning and development person, but really as a organizational performance expert.
And the last question we have now is someone is calling in from the Caribbean where they say work is done using traditional approaches. They now have to press the reset button. What do you recommend to engage leaders?
I would recommend the use of these tools because of exactly what you're saying. Everybody is not going to be elbow to elbow again. It's going to be scary for people. And so to be able to use some of the tools that I showed you today, and again, whatever variations you have, is essential, because that's going to present data to the bosses. That doesn't mean you have to give up your culture. It just means you can use those tools in the context of that culture. But you've got to have a good way to communicate with people, and presenting this stuff electronically is going to allow you to do it. You can't just blather on a phone call.
I think that's all the questions we have in our chat, but we have a couple of minutes left if anyone wants to send in some more or use the raise your hand feature. We just got another question. So your discussion is naturally targeted to performance professionals. What guidance would you recommend for a CEO of a small business of 100 employees?
It's a good one, because since I'm sitting in an organization that's actually a little smaller than that, actually. Now is the time to shape the culture that you want. You know this already, but that the things start getting hard in small organizations once you hit about 40, but those 40 are going to be the folks that shape the culture that is going to be eaten by the next 60. So now here we are at 100, and that's going to be the next leap forward, because now you're going to start looking at maybe 200, 250, 300, and you've got to build in the processes that you want now in order to be sure that people can onboard quickly and get into the mix the way culturally and performance-wise that you want them to. And so start automating those methodologies now. And if they change, because you get different people on board with different ideas and different regulations, then those technologies, they can evolve. Maybe, if you pick the right ones. But start documenting that stuff in tools that people can use, and you'll really be able to solidify your growth and the remoteness maybe that you're feeling right now with those 100 folks. Automate, automate, automate.
Okay, I think that's all we have. If anyone has any additional questions, you can either submit them to the chat and I will send them to Dr. Hill, and we'll send the answers out to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today.